He shall give thee the desires of thine heart.
Commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. School.
And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday.
Rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him, who prospereth in his way, because of a man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. All
cease from anger, and forsake wrath.
Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. Our recitation in concert comes from Ephesians chapter 4, verses 10 through 18. And it reads, He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith, and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. But speaking the truth in love, may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual work in the measure of every part, make an increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love. This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having an understanding darkness, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. Amen. You know, this opening exercise could be a Sunday school lesson in itself.
That's true.
Some interesting things right there. Our lesson today is support for needed projects. Comes from Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 through 12. The key verse, and the God that hath caused his name to dwell there, destroy all kings and people that shall put to their hand to alter and to destroy this house of God, which is at Jerusalem. I, Darius, have made a decree. Let it be done with speed. Ezra, verse 12 of King James Version. During the reign of the Persian King Cyrus, the foundation of the temple was laid. This was around 536 BC. But work stopped on the temple until the second year of King Darius, which was about 520 BC, which was about 16 years later. Now, last week we studied King Cyrus, and we studied the decree that King Cyrus had given to Ezra to go back and start working on the temple. And they did. They originally went back and started working on the temple, laid the foundation for it, but they kind of got a little sidetracked. Okay? That was both outside and inside opposition that caused this delay. The opposition from the outside came from Judea's enemies, whose request to help in the building project was denied. The Israelites wanted to make sure that it was pure. And they wouldn't let anyone that was not an Israelite work on the temple. Well, their enemies got upset with them because they wouldn't let them help them. You know, it's very seldom that somebody gets upset with you because you won't let them help them. But in this case, I don't know if the Israelites felt as though they had an ulterior motive or really what was going on, but they denied their help, told them they didn't need it. Okay? The delay in completing the temple also had some opposition from within Israel, though, as the people put their own interests first and became lax in finishing the work. You know, they probably went out there and worked for a while, and then they figured out, hey, I got some things I need to do. Okay? Rather than work on this temple, I can be working on my house or my farm or whatever. And a lot of them quit working. But because of this, the Lord sent a famine throughout Judea, draining the people of their resources. God works in mysterious ways. And when we don't follow God's plan, God, in essence, punishes us. A famine makes food kind of hard to get. So they didn't have maybe the proper nutrition, what have you, or the proper amount of food. So they were out hustling food more so than anything else rather than working on the temple. The building project, though, was resumed under the leadership of Zerubbabel, Balel, and Jeshua, accompanied by God's prophets some 16 years after the foundation was finished. So they finally got back to it under the leadership of these two Israelites. At that time, Tanati and Shetabozina, the Persian officials placed in Israel along with some others, wanted to know who gave the returning captives the authority to rebuild the temple. Now, they started rebuilding the temple years ago. Now, all of a sudden, the governor here and his sidekick decided they want to know who told y'all to do that. So they started questioning him. And they sent a letter to King Darius and asked him to investigate this, which he eventually did. But I don't think they're going to be happy with what he told them. Now, the exiles intended to rebuild their temple and return to Mosaic law. They would return to true worship of Yahweh, live purely, and separate from the people of the land. When they went to Babylon and when they went to Egypt, they started intermingling with the people of those countries. And they thought that God was not pleased with them. And he wasn't, because they had started worshiping the gods of those people. And God was not happy with that. He wanted their undivided attention. God is a jealous God. He doesn't want us worshiping anything but him. And their goal was to get back to true worship to Yahweh, to live purely, and to separate from the people of these other lands. That was their goal. The exile occurred because their ancestors compromised God's worship. Their ancestors entered into relationships with foreigners who influenced them to worship foreign gods. Thus, the returning Jews refused to allow foreigners to participate in the rebuilding of the temple. King Darius of Persia learned of the decree by Cyrus that allowed them to go back and start building the temple, and he made provisions for the work to continue on the temple in Jerusalem. Oftentimes our mates can influence our religious preference. I had a couple of my friends that were not Catholic, and they chose to marry young ladies that were Catholic. And before they could marry, they actually had to convert and become Catholic. Or she had to give up her Catholic faith. It was either one or the other. And because I think a lot of them may have had to do something similar to this. But however it was done, it usually worked out for them. But that was come about probably as a result of this, of that outside influence on how they worship. Oftentimes we run into opposition with how we worship, especially from a mate. Oftentimes it doesn't necessarily share the same views that we do. That could be a problem. Most of us, though, find out that we're going to be on one accord as far as religion is concerned before we get to marriage. Now, I have known a couple, 2 or 3 couples, that didn't marry because of their faith. I don't even know how they began to date each other or see each other, and they knew that there was going to be a problem with the faith. But they didn't marry as a result of that. And I'm sure it hurt because maybe they were in love with each other. But as a result of their faith, they did not become a couple. Our first exposition. Now, my book's going to have a little bit different title from what yours does. The King's Support. Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. And it reads, Then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in the house of the rolls where the treasures were laid up in Babylon. And there was found at Archimetta in the palace that is in the province of Medes a roll, and therein was a record thus written. Now, this was found at his palace. This was the summer residence of the king. Okay, that's where he'd go down and spend the summers. In the first year of Cyrus the king, the same Cyrus the king made a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be builded, the place where they offered sacrifices, and let the foundations therein be strongly laid. The height thereof 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 60 cubits, with 3 rows of great stones and a row of hewed timber. And let the expenses be given out of the king's house. And also let the golden and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took forth out of the temple, which is at Jerusalem, and brought unto Babylon, be restored, and brought again unto the temple, which is at Jerusalem, every one to his place, and place them in the house of God. Now he was showing them that maybe he wasn't a worshiper of their God, but he, like Cyrus, understood that in order to get along with the Israelites, he had to do some things, okay, because he wanted everything to be at peace. And that is a sign of a good ruler. All the presidents that we have haven't been black. All of them haven't been Baptists. Okay, I think the one we have now is a Catholic. But in order for a president or anyone that is a leader of a country to get along with the people within that country, he has to listen to what their needs are. Whether or not he agrees with everything or not, he still has to take that into consideration. Okay. Now, when the people resumed their work on the temple, Tattenai, of the province beyond the river, I don't know why they didn't name this, give it a name, but they called it the province beyond the river. He sent a letter to King Darius reporting the work of the Jews. He requested that the archives be searched to confirm if there was a decree that gave the people permission to rebuild the temple. This guy here was trying to stir up a little trouble. He was like, okay, y'all rebuilding this temple. Who told you you could do it? I want to see it in writing. And we get those kind of things oftentimes. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody didn't show up out here and ask us, well, who told y'all could remodel this church? Y'all didn't get no permit. Or y'all didn't do this or do that. You know, people come up with anything that they can, not just to block the work of the Lord, but to block things that we're oftentimes doing. I know if you live in the city of Huntsville, if you want to build anything, they want you to come get a permit. And then they'll come over there, look at it, and tell you what you did wrong, or they'll tell you if it's okay, or what have you. So, it really, you're paying them to come over and tell you that it's structurally sound, or it's wired correctly, or it's correct, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
it's really, I mean,
they come to see how much property you own.
In some cases, it's beneficial. So if you have, it helps keep them shady contractors,
Yeah.
kind of in line as well, because it makes them hold their work standard up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you got some carpenters that claim to be carpenters.
They cut corners.
Yeah, and they'll cut all kind of corners. You know, you want none of your corners to be square. Your foundation may not be solid. The roof may not be what it's supposed to be. The wiring may be faulty, and that's the kind of stuff they're trying to keep down. Now, the people you talking about gonna come see how much property you got, those are your tax assessors. Anytime you do some improvements on your property, guess what happens to your taxes?
Well, like you say, side contractors, you have, they jacking up, they say, no, pay me.
Yeah, everybody's after a little bit of the money. Now, after a search of the archives in Babylon was made and no decree was found, instead the decree was found in the palace at the king's summer residence. The decree supported what the Jews had said. It went right down the line with what, it was actually what King Cyrus had said. It went right down the line with that. And after they found the decree, they discovered the exact specifications for the temple. The 3 cubits high, 3 cubits wide. Okay? And the instructions for funding the temple were what essentially was becoming a project of the empire. In other words, they said the funding for the temple would come out of the king's palace. That was the king's money, the money that the king took up for the rebuilding. The king, with the money, kings always want to tax everybody to keep the kingdom running. So out of the money that they got for taxes and what have you, that money was to be used by the Israelites to rebuild the temple. Now, not only were the people allowed to build the temple, they were to be given whatever they needed to complete the project from the wealth of the empire. The sacred articles that were stolen by the Babylonians were to be returned and placed in the new temple. The God of heaven would once again have a proper home or a proper house. They wanted to make sure that whatever was taken out of that temple when the Babylonians invaded, it was returned. And that's what they did. And that's what the decree of King Cyrus said. And King Darius, Babylonian kings, if they said something, the only person that could go against it was them. They were the only people that could change it. So if King Cyrus said something, the other kings following him had to honor it. They couldn't go in and say, well, we're not going to do that anymore. They had to honor it. If you notice here in recent years, especially with our former president, first thing he wanted to do was go in and change everything that Obama had done.
Yeah.
Okay. And the the Persians were totally different. If their king made a decree of something, they knew that they did not have the right to touch it. They left it alone. But in our society, just for the simple fact that they didn't do it, they want to change it. And it may be a great benefit to the people, but in this case, I think Donald Trump wanted to change it just because a black man had done it.
Yeah.
I may be wrong, but that is my view. I think he said, well, hey, Obama did this, so I'm going to undo everything that Obama did. And, what Obama didn't just benefit black people. It benefited everybody. Okay? And Donald Trump didn't see it that way. He was, oh, no, we got to do something about this because 4 or 5 of us are not in agreement with it. Now, if they hadn't been in agreement with him, that bill never would have passed. But that was something that Donald Trump wanted to do. Let's go to our next exposition. Whatever was needed. Ezra 6, verses 6 through 12. And it reads, now therefore, Tatnani, governor beyond the river, Shetar-Bozane, and your companions, the Alpha-Sacharites, which are beyond the river, be ye far from hence. Let the work of this house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews build this house of God in his place. Moreover, I make a decree, what ye shall do to the elders of these Jews for the building of this house of God, that of the king's goods, even of the tribute beyond the river, forthwith expenses be given unto these men, that they be not hindered, and that which they have need of, both young bullocks and rams and lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the appointment of the priests, which are at Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices of sweet savors unto the God of heaven, and pray for the life of the king and of his sons. And I have made a decree that whosoever shall alter this word, let timber be pulled down from his house, and being set up, let him be hanged thereon, and let his house be made a dunghill for this. And the God that has caused his name to dwell there destroy all kings and people that shall put to their hand to alter and to destroy this house of God, which is at Jerusalem. I, Darius, have made a decree. Let it be done with speed. In other words, Darius, made some serious consequences and made this governor have to pay for the temple. Because in verse 6 and 7, the king ups the ante on it. The decree of Cyrus was found, and King Darius sent a letter to the governor of the province beyond the river and his associates. They were to stop interfering with the work of the Jews. No, we're leaving people alone. Instead, they were to give full support to the efforts. Then not only did he tell them to leave alone, but now he's telling them y'all gonna pay for it. Okay? That's a wonderful thing. They were to recognize the leader of the Jews as the servants of God, of the God of heaven. In other words, he told them, y'all gonna have to recognize these people, okay? And leave those people alone. The king supported the efforts of the Jews by financing the work with royal revenue that was to come from the tribute the province of beyond the river was to pay. Every province had to pay the governor taxes. And he was going to take the tax money specifically from the province that was beyond the river to pay for rebuilding the temple. So I'm sure they were really upset with the governor, with the king at this time, because he taking their money and paying for this temple. And not only did he take their money, he told y'all have to provide for the burnt offering. Y'all gonna have to give them young bullocks and lambs and goats for the burnt offerings. You're gonna have to provide them with grain for the offerings, and drink offerings had to be made. So that means you're gonna have to provide them with the rams and the lambs, the grain that they needed, and the wine to make these offerings. King Darius' motive was that God would be pleased with their sacrifices. King Darius believed that the God of the land will pour out his wrath upon the king and his family if the king failed to obey God. King Darius was a pretty smart man. He was trying to stay on God's side. And he was wanting to make sure that God did not pour out any wrath on he and his family. And he also told them that were at Israel that they needed to pray for the king and his family. Which we don't have a problem with that. We don't have a problem with praying for each other, and we don't have a problem with praying for those that are in authority, whether we agree with them or not. But the king, he kind of put these guys on the barrel. Y'all, not only are you going to have to pay for it, you're going to have to supply all the goods that they need. Now, we typically hear God making opponents or enemies footstools. But here we see God making them sponsors. You know, we hear oftentimes about God will make your enemies your footstool, and he will. He'll make your opponents your footstool. Somebody that opposes you, God can turn them into helping you do what you need to do. In verse 11, King Darius offers not only the financial provisions of the Persian crown, but also the protection of the empire as well. This verse makes all that was come before it enforceable. The language here is interesting because not only would the perpetrator be killed, but it is likely that his family would have suffered as well. In other words, he says that if somebody raises a hand against these people rebuilding this temple, he's going to be hung. He's going to be killed. And not only are we going to kill him, we're going to burn his house down. We're going to make his house into a dunghill. And this is going to signify that the violator of the order would no longer be remembered. This would erase the history of one's identity and family line, not just the correction of one misstep. In other words, if he's going to make your name no longer be mentioned, that's going to be just like you never existed. He's going to burn your house down, tear your house down. It's going to be like you no longer existed. They're going to erase you from history. And we all want our lineage to go on. Okay? A lot of people are very serious about that. They want their lineage to continue 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 generations on down the line. But here King Darius says, if you go over there messing with them people building that temple, it ain't going to happen for you. Okay, because I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen. We're going to tear your house down. We're going to hang you. Your identity will be erased. There won't be no mention of your name, no mention of your family name. In verse 12, the king continued pronouncing his curse, saying, and the God that has caused his name to dwell there, destroy all kings and people that shall put their hand to alter and to destroy this house of God, which is at Jerusalem. In other words, the king was pronouncing a curse on all future kings and people who should ever have any hand in the destruction of this house of God. In other words, King Darius put God in a position where God didn't need him to, but King Darius was letting everybody know that, hey, if you go up there messing with that temple, even if I'm dead and gone, God's going to take care of it, okay, for messing with the house of God. So he let it be known that if he wasn't there to take care of you, and in essence do God's work, that God would see that it was done, that you would be destroyed. Now it was customary that for any decree signed by a Persian king, it could not be changed or taken back unless that king did it himself. And what Darius would or maybe could not do himself to protect the temple, that God will destroy anyone who will alter and destroy the temple. In other words, if Darius wasn't there or if Darius couldn't do it, then God himself would do it to anyone that altered or destroyed that temple. Now we've learned that the heart of kings is in the hand of God, and he turns it whatever way he pleases. We also learn that when God's time comes for accomplishing his gracious purposes concerning his people, he will raise up instruments for our good, who we may never expect to fulfill God's plan. We don't know who God is going to put to work for, okay? We have no idea. God will supply all of our needs. Moreover, God can do so much more than we could even ever imagine. And this lesson teaches us that the greater the opposition we face, the greater the opportunity for God to bless us. God will take great care of us. Will we allow God to guide our steps? That's the question that we need to ponder today, and the question that we need to answer. But I thought it was interesting that God used King Darius here to help build the temple. Now, we noticed last week that he used Cyrus to help build the temple. Well, that group of Israelites didn't complete the job. I don't know how long it took them to do this, but we know that there was like a 16-year delay right here before Darius made his decree. But just see, we see here how God used them. Now, they weren't even Israelites. They did not worship this God of heaven. They had their own God. But God used them to rebuild the temple. And God would raise up instruments to help fulfill God's plan. He'll raise up people that, we never thought of, or someone that never crossed our mind, someone that's not even religious, to help fulfill his plan. And the second bullet there, God will supply all of our needs. The Israelites, they didn't know where they were going to get the money from to rebuild this temple. They didn't know where they were going to get the things for the sacrificial offerings. They had no idea. But God took care of all that for them. Okay. And they met with great opposition. When you meet with opposition outside your house and inside of your house, that's pretty stiff, because you're catching it from your neighbors and you're catching it from your family. Sometimes you don't know which way to go. But God took care of all of that here. Because of the great opposition that they faced, God used that as an opportunity to bless them. Just like God uses opportunities to bless us. God actually takes great care of us. We sometimes don't see it that way, because he didn't give us a pocket full of money. But I don't see nobody in here that ain't hungry. That's hungry. Okay. I don't see nobody in here that doesn't have a roof over their head. I don't see anybody in here that's not well dressed. So we can say that God is taking care of us. And folks, that last question down there, all we have to do is allow God to guide us. And we don't know which way to go. All we need to do is ask God, and he'll tell us which way we need to go. He will guide our steps. You know, we oftentimes say God will direct our path. He will, if we just let him. That's all we have to do. Just let him direct our path. Good morning, Deacon Archie.
Good morning. Good morning.
I know what happened.
All right.
Any comments this morning?
So we in not Sunday school, but Wednesday night Bible study, Minister Brooks was still talking about the heart of a servant, and he used Job. Job was one of his examples, and his question was, will we be able to go through all the things that Job went through? And in that conversation, it came up about the first thing you have to do is be available. And if you're available to God, then he can use you. Just like he used King Darius and the prior kings, they were there to do the work. You first got to be available, and he'll give you all that you need to accomplish what it is that he has for you to do.
Very, very true, brother.
Because you see what? God has certain ones to fix things over. All them that come late, they can clean the floor out there.
Well, then, you know, God, if we remember back, God actually used the Babylonians to punish the Israelites. But when the Persians came into power, the Persians told the Israelites they could go back home. You know, so God used the Persians, and he used the Babylonians, and he used the Egyptians before he used the Babylonians. Just like.
But you know, I always say, when in times of trouble, go back to Genesis and say, I never lived, never forsaken, provide, and I always say, if it brought me through that, it brings me.
Yes, it will.
And it's such a relief. It's a great relief. Because then we get anxious about everything, you know, and we really don't understand it. It happens so suddenly, you know. But just take a minute and remember what he said. And sometimes it's hard to allow him to do it because you want it right now. But it might take him a little while. But it's gonna come.
It will.
It will come. And you know, he used the Babylonians to punish the Israelites. But they just went way beyond what he wanted them to do. So in turn, he punished them.
Yes.
So like I said, you reap what you sow. And sometimes you reap more than you sow. So it's just amazing that when you read the Bible, it just correlates to what's going on right now.
The Bible is history.
It is.
And
It's
history
and it's repeats
it
itself.
repeats itself. It repeats itself constantly. It's a little bit different, but if you really look at it, it is parallel to what happened centuries ago. There's not a whole lot of difference. But what God wants us to do is have faith and trust in him. And if we have faith and trust in him, and like what Deacon Mercer said, make ourselves available to him to help do his work, then God will take care of us. And yeah, it gets hard. It's hard to trust him. But, you know, I one of my favorite songs is by the Wonderful Harmonizers. And is I Could Have Been Dead. But God brought me through.
And you know, I've heard lots of people, including my nephew, who's been really ill. And he would say, I've never been through this before. I said, no, you haven't. I said, but look where God has brought you from where you were to where you are now. I said, lots of things I haven't been through before. I said, but I knew who was there holding my hand.
Right. You know, we all go through things we've never been through before.
Exactly.
And we may not ever go through them again.
That's right.
But something else is going to come up.
That's right.
And God is going to make us, by us going through something, he's preparing us for the next thing. He's making us just that much stronger. And we gotta have that strength in order to endure. And God gives us that strength. God will give us just what we need. He has never failed us nor forsaken us in any way. The hardest thing is on us. Okay? And that is putting our faith and trust in Him. Because we want to do it. You know, we want to do something. We don't want to sit back and trust God. We want to do it. We want to make it happen. We want it to happen today.
Yes, sir. Putting it in His hands and leaving it there,
Yeah.
not trying
But,
to go back.
Right. You know, a whole lot of people, they give it to God. You know, I see all those people who came up here and put these prayers on the altar. How many of them went and picked it back up? You know, maybe they didn't go up there and actually pick the paper up. But did they let it go necessarily when they put it on the altar? Some of them didn't. You know, they still trying to work it out themselves. Okay. Rather than trusting in God and leaving it with God.
Yes, that's the fight between God and Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Satan is constantly, I mean, God has told us, just leave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
But Satan is constantly telling you, no,
You don't stop working.
you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then you pick it up again and you try to resolve it. And then it's over. Then you realize you can't give it back to God. And 2 or 3 days later, He has an answer. So you go back and pick it up again.
God ain't done nothing yet. So let me see if I can help him a little bit here, help him along the way. But just you know, sometimes it just means we need to give it to God and leave it there. Just forget about it.
You know, Mr. Joseph, that just shows how good God is.
Mm-hmm.
He keeps blessing us in
Yes.
spite of ourselves.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, and not just one and done, like they say, but multiple times.
Amen. And we just take for granted how forgiving God is.
Yeah, he is a forgiving God, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He is a forgiving God, and He does never leave us. You know, He may not come when we want Him to come, which is a very true statement, but He's always right on time. Mm-hmm. He gives us the ability to endure if we just wait patiently upon Him. He will let us endure. Any other comments this morning? If not, even hard, you got time to get you a good cup of coffee.
Okay, yeah.
But not yet. Not quite yet. Let's have our closing words and a prayer before we leave. Our closing words come from Proverbs chapter 10, verses 2 through 11. And it reads, treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivereth from death. The Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish, but He casteth away the substance of the wicked. He becometh poor that dealeth with the slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. Blessings are upon the head of the just, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. The wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. He that walketh uprightly walketh surely, but he that perverteth his way shall be known. He that winketh with the eye causeth sorrow, but a prating fool shall fall. The mouth of a righteous man is a well of life, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked.
Dick and Jeff, I saw Sister Timmons come in with the kids. Before you close up with the prayer, you want me to grab her and see if she's ready?
You can.
wrapping up and I'll be in just a second.
Okay. I think this time change affected a lot of people.